So I searched all over the internet and tried to find a good tutorial showing you how to use Blender's internal render engine to apply materials and have them actually look 3D. But it appears most of those tutorials are based on the Cycles render engine, which we haven't gotten to yet. So I'm going to make my own. What we're going to try to do here is create a texture that supports this mud and have it look like cracked mud in 3D and not just like a picture on a surface. So if I come back here to Blender, what I've got right now is the default cube, so I'm going to delete that, and then I'm going to add in a plane and scale it up a little bit. And my picture is a rectangle, not a square, so I'm going to shrink that maybe a little bit so it's more of a rectangle. And now we're going to add a new material to that object. Maybe I'll actually even name the object. Hang on a second. Come up here and we'll just call it mud. And we'll add a new material. We'll also name our material mud. And we'll give our mud a color. Let's make it kind of a tan. And we'll come over here to textures and we'll add a new texture. Make sure it's an image or a movie. And we'll open up our mud texture, which is called soil cracked right there. Now if I switch this over to rendered mode, there's our soil texture applied to our object. It's super smooth and flat. So we're going to change a few things about that. First thing we're going to do is make sure this texture is actually mapped to our object. So I'm going to go back into solid view. I'm going to jump into edit mode and I'm going to unwrap the object, pressing U to get into the unwrap menu. I'm going to go back into object mode, and over here on the texture I'm going to go down to mapping, set it to UV, choose the UV map, and let's see if that made any difference in how that looks. Yeah, I think it looks a little bit better. I think it was stretched across the middle last time. Now it sort of fits better. Okay, so how do we actually make it 3D? Well, there's a few different steps. We need a few different images. And the first one I'm going to apply, which gives the biggest effect, is a displacement map. Now, a displacement map is a black and white image where the black areas are low and the white areas are high. And since this image is just a bunch of different shades of brown, we need to go into Gimp or some other photo editing software that'll let you have control of the colors and turn it into something black and white. For this, I'm going to go to colors and go to desaturate, and there's a nice grayscale, and then I'm going to go to colors again, and I'm going to go to levels, and what I'm going to do is, this is the white slider over here. It'll make whites whiter. This is a gray slider. You can adjust your grays, and this is the black slider. You can adjust your blacks. Now, I actually want this grayscale image before I go completely black and white, because we're going to use this for something else later. We're going to use this for something called normals. So I'm going to export this as, let's see, soil cracked, and we'll name it grayscale. Okay, now I'm going to go back into colors, go back to levels again, and we're going to continue adjusting this until it's a lot more black and white and a whole lot less gray. Okay, now the idea here, that's a little too much. Go back this way some. I want a lot of those little bumps to go away. I don't want a whole lot of that in the rock. I'm just looking to get those cracks. And that's pretty good. I can mess with this for a long time trying to get it perfect. Not going to do it. For now, good enough. We've got our displacement map. So, let's go to File and Export As. And I've already done this once, but I'm going to just do it again because I think I like this one better. Going to replace it. And export. Come on. Okay, why is this not going? That was weird. It didn't accept my click. I had to press enter. Okay, jumping back over to Blender, I'm going to do something and it's not going to work, and I'm going to explain why. To add a displacement map, it's actually a modifier. So you're going to go into modifiers. It's a modifier for both Blender render and 4 cycles render, so that's not going to change. We're going to go down here under deform and we're going to choose displace. And we're going to add a new texture just for this displacement map. I'm going to jump over here to textures. You can see we're making a texture for our displace modifier. And I'm going to call it mud displace. And I'm going to open a new image. Go to my desktop again and get my soil cracked displace. And that should do it. Okay. Notice, actually I'm going to jump over here to the modifiers again. It didn't do anything. This doesn't look bumpy. It still looks flat. Here's why. The displacement modifier actually changes your vertices. Well, if you've only got 4 vertices, because this is just a plane that hasn't been subdivided at all, then there's nothing really to change. So to fix that, we're going to go into edit mode and we're going to subdivide this. So subdivide, let's give it, I don't know, the higher the number you give it, the better it will look, but then the longer it will take for your computer to be able to process it. For this, I'm going to give it, let's say 20 cuts. And then I'm going to subdivide one more time and give it another 10 cuts. Ooh, that's pretty dense. Maybe I'll give it 5. I don't want my computer to struggle that bad. And now let's go back into a rendered view. And wow, that's what your displacement modifier is doing. By default, it's set way too high. So if we take a look, the strength is set to 1. Usually you're going to want numbers like 0.0 something. Let's try 0.05. See what that looks like. Alright, that's a little bit better. It's a little blocky yet. So I'm going to try smoothing it and seeing what that does. Let me scroll down over here. Oop, wait a minute. Not finding it there. Let's get out of edit mode. There we go. Smooth shading. Let's go back into rendered. That's a little better. Still kind of blocky in places. I'm going to add another modifier to help give even more vertices here. So I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier. And that modifier should happen before the displacement. So if you've never used them before, there are 2 arrows to the right here, and they let you move modifiers up and down in the stack. So I'm going to move my subdivision surface above my displacement modifier, and look what that did. We are much, much cleaner now. I didn't even look to see how many subdivisions. That was just 1 extra subdivision. So that looks pretty good. My cracks look a little deep at 0.05. I'm going to change it to 0.02. Let's see what that looks like. That looks better. Okay. Next, our mud is super, super flat and shiny on the surface. We're going to fix that with something called a normal map. Now, Blender, not Blender, but Gimp, rather, can create normal maps with a plugin that we can't install at school. If you are working from home, you can install the plugin. The link is in the Moodle. But at school, we're going to use this smartpage.net smart normal tool to generate our normals for us. So I'm going to load an image, and I saved that grayscale image earlier just for this purpose. So I'm going to go over here and find the grayscale image. And there is our normal generated that quickly. We can adjust the settings and play with it to get as much texture detail here as we want. I think that's going to be good enough. I'm not going to mess with it too bad. I'm going to check the blur though and see if I like that or not. I think I'm going to leave the blur on. Again, this is another one of those things you can really play with and spend some time on. I'm going to hit save. That opens it in a browser window, and I'm going to save image as from there. That should have brought up a dialog. Why didn't it? Okay, how about open image in a new tab? Let's try that. Save image as. Okay. And I'm going to go to my desktop again. I'm going to call it soil cracked normal. And do we have a choice? Nope, it's going to be a PNG. Okay. Back into Blender. In order to do this, we need a new texture. So with the mud selected, I'll jump over to materials and jump to textures. Grab a new slot, hit new. Open our new normal texture, which is on the desktop. Soil cracked normal. Well, that just changed all kinds of things because now we have to scroll down and tell it we're going to use this texture as a normal. And so if we go into influence, which may or may not be open, notice diffuse has color checked right off the bat. Well, we don't want the colors from this, so we're going to uncheck that. We're going to go down here to geometry, and we're going to check that. It says geometry normal. And there are all kinds of bumps and ridges. So we're going to also slow this down a little bit. Here we're going to say 0.05, see what that looks like. And that's a little bit, but not much. Let's go to maybe 0.1. All right, that's looking a little bit more realistic as far as we've actually got some lumps and bumps on there, but they're not too intense. I am curious, 0.02, just to see what it looks like. Whoops, not 0.2, 0.2. What was I doing? That might be a little too intense, 0.15. All right, that's my last change. Like it or not, I'm sticking with it. Okay, so now we've actually got something that looks 3D and has some texture to it, but it's awfully shiny. So I would like to do something about that. I mean, it's mud. It shouldn't be that shiny. And so to do that, we're going to add something called a specular map. And a specular map, the white areas of the map are shiny and reflective, and the dark areas are not shiny and reflective. So that's going to be a grayscale image or our displacement map, depending on how we want it to look. For now, I'm just going to use the grayscale image. So that means we're going to have another texture. So new, open, go to the desktop again. We're going to go find our grayscale image. And we're going to scroll down. We're going to tell it not to use the color from this, but instead to use the specularity. And we're going to play with this a little bit until we're happy with it as well. Let's say 0.2, just like the normals, and see what that looks like. That's not bad, actually. And that's going to be the end of my tutorial. I could continue to tweak and play and perfect this all I wanted, but really, that is a pretty good 3D image from a 2D texture using Gimp to generate the normal and the grayscale and the displacement options for us. And there's our cracked mud.